What's up, curious gamers? Every day we consume hundreds of products, and as we know, not all of them are the same. Some are more common and cheap, and others are a bit exclusive and can be a little more expensive. From the Matsutake mushroom you're eating to the Dr. Martin boots you'd like to buy. There are some things that, for some reason, are extremely expensive. Because of this and much more, here are 10 things you didn't know. Why are they so expensive? Matsutake mushrooms. Although it may be surprising to hear, just like some food items, they can also be quite expensive. That's the case with Matsutake mushrooms, which are used in different Asian dishes, like sushi. These mushrooms have a strong flavor, unlike those that grow in other countries, because people say they're less fresh and have milder flavor than other mushrooms. The truth is that their demand remains considerably high, especially in Asia, and that's why their price keeps going up. The price of Matsutake mushrooms is really high, as they're sold for about $500 per kilo, and at one point they even reached $800 per kilo in 2019 when a drought made their growth more difficult. The reason for their high cost is closely linked to their habitat, since it's extremely difficult to find them, and they also grow together with trees. Another reason is a parasite that harms the trees and impacts the mushroom's survival. These are some reasons why these mushrooms are so expensive. And although it may not be a surprise that the main problem lies in their detailed process of growth and harvest, the truth is that their value is truly astonishing. Stay away from mushrooms. Timmy Dr. Martens. If you are a boot lover, it's very likely that you have seen or heard about the famous Dr. Martens. These were created in 1960, and their high quality is a major factor that influences their high price, since they have an air-cushioned sole for greater comfort when walking. Additionally, nowadays the production of these boots is so popular that about 250 styles have to be made each year, and all these styles remain just as popular. And you're probably wondering why they're so expensive, and the truth is, there's more than one reason. Nowadays, a pair of Dr. Martens can easily cost over $220. Interestingly, these boots were initially valued at about $3, which is roughly $50 today. Around 1990, they became popular among various urban tribes. But it wasn't until the 2000s, when production nearly went bankrupt, that they chose to move to, and it was in 2002 when Dr. Martens became as iconic as before. This also became a point of interest for boot lovers, which led to high demand. And it was in 2014 when the company Myrrh acquired the business and made the price of the boots go up by 25%. Cernet Wright scissors. This particular item might seem a bit strange to you because it's so expensive, and that's perfectly understandable. We're talking about the Cernet Wright scissors, which you've probably seen at least once in your life. Their blades are very sharp and are carefully aligned, and in fact, to make one, the craft is not only passed from master to apprentice, but it also requires at least 5 years of training. Cernet scissors cost around $200, although there are different types for different purposes. So this amount can vary a bit. And you're probably wondering, why could a pair of scissors cost so much? Well, the reason is their high quality and level of detail because, as we mentioned before, it's not as simple as just sharpening the blades. That's it. Their creation involves a long and specific process in which every part of the scissors is made to be simply perfect, even if that means it takes longer. As a result, you get scissors that are clearly different from industrial ones because of their craftsmanship, quality, and design. Cowboy hat. You probably remember some of those old cowboy movies where they wore the classic hats we all know. And it's likely that it was a Stetson Cowboy Hat, one of the most expensive hats in the world. If not, it's still the number one. Its popularity is such that manufacturers really aren't afraid of its high price, since its sales are guaranteed. You might want to prepare yourself to hear this because its price, although it depends on the style of the hat, ranges from $200 to $5,000. Yes, you heard that right. In fact, there are at least two main reasons to justify it. And first of all, it might not surprise you to know that it's because of the manufacturing process. High-quality materials are used to make it, because unlike other companies, they buy their own wool to turn it into felt, which will then go through an elaborate process. And secondly, their value is due to their undeniable popularity. Surely you know the Indiana Jones movies or those cowboy films from many decades ago. And even today, it's not uncommon to see celebrities wearing a Stetson hat, which is why its price remains the same. Gong. Have you ever heard a gong being played? Surely its loud sound is familiar to you, but you probably didn't know how much work goes into making one. As we know, it's an instrument that is very popular in Asia, mainly for religious rituals. You can buy a small one for a few dollars, but a regular-sized one is actually quite different. Easily, a gong can cost you thousands and thousands of dollars, and by that we mean about $33,000. Its high price is quite surprising, although the process behind its creation is one of the reasons why it's so expensive. The gong can be made from different materials, which determine its price. For example, one made of brass will cost more than one made of steel. However, another reason in the making of this instrument is its design. It is possible to make different patterns, and some people even prefer to customize it with certain designs to achieve specific sounds. Even so, the hardest part is not that, but being able to tune it. To do this, a lot of preparation is required because a professional must know exactly at which points the gong will sound louder. And with the help of some tools, they end up giving it a very detailed finish, which results in an instrument with a high sound. How interesting, Asian gentlemen. Incense. Maybe at some point you've lit incense in your house and been enchanted by its aroma. In fact, there are around 550 species of trees from which it can be obtained. And even though it might seem a bit strange, both original incense and myrrh are extremely expensive. So you might want to save some after hearing this fact. In case you're interested in knowing their price, just one sack of Type A incense is worth about $430. And essential oils can cost up to $6,000 per liter. Without a doubt, this is quite expensive, and you might be wondering why. The trees from which incense and myrrh are obtained are extremely difficult to plant, since they require specific climate conditions. In addition, the main problem is that extracting incense from these trees should only happen 2 or 3 times a year so that it can heal. However, many untrained extractors do it many more times. And these are the factors that are bringing these trees closer and closer to extinction, which is why incense and myrrh end up being quite expensive. Manuka honey. Who doesn't love the sweet taste of honey? Most likely you've tried it more than once, and maybe it's as easy as buying it from the supermarket. Well, there is one in particular called Manuka honey, which is known for being more delicious and viscous than any other in the world. In fact, it represents only 1% of the total honey in the world, and it only grows in New Zealand. Well, it's said that just 100 grams of this honey costs almost $100, so you can imagine how expensive it can be. And the reasons for that price are more than understandable. Manuka honey is very hard to get, especially because it's only found on some islands in New Zealand. And that means the bees have to travel about 6 kilometers to be able to work with it. Even beekeepers must use helicopters to reach those areas for work. And on top of all that, this honey has health properties. It's used in the beauty industry, and it's in high demand at different restaurants. So you can imagine how important Kashmir is. Most likely, at some point you've wanted to buy a winter garment and were surprised by its price. If that's the case, it was probably Kashmir, one of the most expensive fabrics, which, unlike what you might think, doesn't come from sheep, but from goats, whose fur is much thicker. However, it's so hard to obtain that Kashmir represents only 0.5% of the total wool production around the world. For example, a sweater made from this material costs about $100, and some cashmere garments are even more expensive. Maybe this amount might seem like a lot, especially considering that you can find sweaters or other garments made from different materials, like wool, for a much lower price. And the reason for its value is how difficult it is to obtain these fibers. As we mentioned before, they come from goats, but you need a lot of them to make different coats. This means that while you can get around 3 kilos of wool from a sheep, you only get about 300 grams from a goat, which would only be enough to make a scarf. On top of that, producers have to handle this material with great care since it's a pretty complex process. So next time you find a cheap cashmere coat, you might want to double check it. Salt from Iceland. As we know, salt can be a cheap food, one that you always have at home, and you would never imagine it could be worth so much. Plus, it's probably as simple as buying it at the supermarket. And in general, the production process is quite simple and doesn't involve many expenses, whether it's through rocks or by evaporating water. However, there is a salt factory in Iceland that sells its product for 3 times the price of regular salt, reaching up to $10 or even a little more. The work behind this salt is simple but somewhat complex, since geothermal energy is used to make it, and almost everything is done by hand. In this case, they mix seawater with hot water, and that way, they get a greater amount of salt. Just as we can see here, this food can be found in the best restaurants. Interestingly, its process is not harmful to the environment, and as a result, we only get perfectly clear salt ready to be packaged. So, in conclusion, it's because this salt is only produced in Iceland, and it takes 7 to 10 days to form, that its price is so high. Rolls-Royce car. When we talk about major car brands, it's obvious that Rolls-Royce easily comes to mind as one of our top choices. And it's no surprise it's common to see several celebrities owning and driving one, not only because of its unmistakable style, but also because of its high quality and technology, since it has many features that allow you to sit in a luxury car, but with the performance of any supercar. However, why are they so expensive? In fact, there are many models of Rolls-Royce cars, so their price clearly varies. And we can find some for $300,000 as well as others for millions of dollars, like the case of a Rolls-Royce boat tail. The latter ended up costing $28 million, making it one of the most expensive cars in history. The reason for its price is that this is not just any company, since each car it makes is almost completely customized, which means it takes entire weeks to produce just one. From the color and the final finish to interior details that match the buyer's style, everything can be chosen. In fact, once a specific color is chosen for you, if someone else wanted to copy it, they would have to ask your permission to do so. Yes, just like it sounds. All these factors, along with its fame and demand, are why the Rolls-Royce is so expensive. Subscribe.